Hello from Chicago. I'm Tom Tresser, and I call myself a civic educator and public defender. Welcome to America at the Precipice, the failure of the nonprofit sector and the opportunity before us. A few things about me. I have a background in the arts, and I've started or led 14 nonprofit enterprises in the arts, community development, and civic engagement. I've been married 30 years to Merle Green Tresser, a powerhouse that you see right down there. Now, I used to be a Shakespearean actor, and I was one of the most successful non-equity theater producers in recent memories. I've taught classes on organizing, leadership, creativity, public policy, and nonprofit operations at 6 local universities. My civic portfolio is extensive. In 2009, I was the co-leader of the No Games Chicago campaign that derailed Chicago's bid for the 2016 Summer Games. In 2013, I co-founded the Civic Lab in Chicago's West Loop, which I believe was America's first co-working civic makerspace dedicated to social justice. We are now a Black-led 501c3 nonprofit do tank for civic engagement. My civic comrades, America is at a precipice. I want to use the next 20 minutes or so to lay out the crisis our democracy faces and share an analysis of our nonprofit sector, which I partly blame for the state of justice in America. I then want to lift up what I see as a unique challenge we have before our nonprofit sector, our leaders and constituents. If we act newly, collectively, and powerfully, I believe we can save our country from a descent into white nationalist-fueled fascism and plutocracy. I want to share some images and data, and it's all very depressing. It's shocking. It's aggravating. Get ready to be upset and agitated. Frankly, we need a major dose of agitation and context setting to land on the urgency of now. Washington, D.C., the Capitol building, on the morning of January 6th, 2021, we saw actions and images that shocked the world. The government estimates that as many as 2,500 people who took part in the events of January 6th could be charged with federal crimes, and that includes more than 1,000 incidents of assault. But perhaps the most shocking image to me was this guy, Kevin Searfried, who carried the Confederate flag into the Capitol. So who were these insurrectionists? Well, they were overwhelmingly white, male, 35 years and older, 1/3 white collar, and over 1/3 blue collar. 75% no college degree. 1/3 had a criminal record, which is about 1/3 higher than the overall 2020 electorate. Clearly some nutcases, but mostly not. This guy is a very scary person. Elmer Stewart Rhodes, the founder of the far-right militia group, the Oath Keepers, has been charged with sedition, according to the Justice Department, and an additional 10 people face separate charges in connection to the riot. According to the charges, they were prepared and willing to use force and to transport firearms and ammunition into Washington, D.C. These guys scare the bejeebers out of me. The indictment further said, this seditious conspiracy says that Rhodes, with his co-defendants, conspired to oppose by force the execution of the laws governing the transfer of presidential power on January 20th, 21. They traveled across the country to Washington, D.C. and arrived there in early 2021, says the indictment. Okay. On February 3rd, just passed, the Republican National Party officially censored Representatives Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for taking part in the House investigation of the January 21 insurrection, saying that they, Kinzinger and Cheney, were participating in, quote, persecution of ordinary citizens engaged in legitimate political discourse. Ordinary citizens engaged in legitimate political discourse. These guys, right? Okay. All across the country, Republicans, allies of former President Trump, are running and winning at all levels of government with immediate and profound impacts on our civics and the future of democracy. For example, they're seeking to control state elections processes, allowing the legislature to simply nullify the results of the ballot box. What do we need elections for? And taking over school boards to ban books and stop the teaching of history. All this is happening right now. All right, that's what's happened and is what is happening in our civics. Now for some depressing numbers. What does it mean to be secure? We sure spend enough public dollars on our defense, but all that money did not stop the insurrectionists from gathering, flooding the Capitol, ransacking it, attacking the Capitol Police, and then leaving. In 2020, the US spent more on, quote, defense than the next 11 highest spenders. And since 9/11, America has spent $8 trillion on war and the care of veterans. What did that $8 trillion buy us? Could that $8 trillion have been better spent? Meanwhile, the wealth gap has grown to a place where the top 1% have as much wealth as the entire 60% of Americans. If this continues without intervention, Black household families will have zero household wealth in about 20 years. Okay, now let's take a look at our sector, the nonprofit or independent sector, and see why we have been part of this story and why I lay so much blame at our own feet. All right, first, the nonprofit mindset. We are very reactive. I liken our sector to these two sturdy street sweepers following the elephants of the for-profit sector and the government sector, sweeping up after them. You might say we're trying to undo the sins that the for-profit businesses have visited upon us and to make up for something that the government sector has permitted to do, or we're doing something that the government has failed to do. Either way, we are too little and too late. We're also constantly underfunded and we're spread thin. Many nonprofit workers have no health care, no pension plan, no path for career development. Yet we're the front line in the delivery of all kinds of essential services. The need is great and growing every day. We burn out and fade away. We spend so much time begging for handouts from billionaire class foundations that sort of serve as money-holding repositories for robber barons from over a century ago. And the dead hand of those dead, mostly white men, completely dominate philanthropy, and their wishes and views of the world reach from beyond the grave to guide our biggest charities and our sector every day. And many board members of these charities are from big law, big business, and big money. And they're conservative, cautious, and they have a very proscribed perspective on what constitutes for real change and what real justice looks like. Failure. And yet, we do take in a bunch of money, over $471 billion in 2020. And over the last few years, that comes up to over $1 trillion. What has all that money gotten us? Nowhere, I claim. And despite all the charitable dollars flowing to our sector, let's be clear, we cannot charity our way out of the multiple crises we find ourselves in. We can't charity our way out of staggering inequity, out of poverty, out of hunger, out of a degraded environment. No, we are here because of the commissions of business and the omissions of government. And this chart shows that just the proposed cuts to SNAP, food stamps, under President Trump was equal to the combined assets of these 15 major foundations. So in this case, I guess I would say the government was heading in the right direction in that it had a SNAP program in the first place, but it was not enough to meet the needs, and it was in danger of being decimated. But I would say that most of the people viewing this video work for the nonprofits in the 501c3 space. That's where I've worked these last 40 years. And so there is a predisposition in these organizations, as well as legal restrictions that forbid all these kinds of nonprofits from doing direct electoral work. Your organization cannot endorse candidates, but they can do a lot of electoral related civic work, including voter registration, issue education, candidate forums, and even candidate training. But 99.99% of our organizations do nothing at all in those spaces. Friends, we can and must do much more. And we've been carefully studying this lack of power for a long time. From the Aspen Institute in 2007, they interviewed a bunch of nonprofit leaders and found out that most said that policy participation is really very limited or happening not at all. And this is around just lobbying. And so we say, you get an F. Fast forward from the independent sector in 2012, we get 268 pages of blather from this report. We don't really get a sense of how much organizing and advocacy America's nonprofit sector was actually doing then. It was negligible. But when nonprofit leaders were asked if they were even aware of the major policy issues directly impacting their sector, we got a whole lot of, I don't know. That's what the green is. Not aware of the issue. That's a failure. But we're not done yet. From the National Council of the Nonprofits in 2019, this report, which powerfully lays out the dimensions of the nonprofit sector and the very serious challenges that we face as it strains under an increasingly unsupportable demand. But then, what was their solution? What was their inspiring call to action? Notice the words: protect, amplify, embrace, advocate. Nothing about power or running for office or governing. You know what? It sounds like we're still running after and cleaning up after those darn elephants. All right, what's going on? While all this was happening, I've been tracking the far right and the radical conservative movement since 1991. Here's a slide from a presentation I did in the early 1990s when I was an arts activist rallying creative professionals to save the National Endowment for the Arts. And then again in the early 2000s when I traveled the country urging creative professionals to run for office. So you see, this is a front page of the New York Times from 1992, headline: quietly, Christian conservatives win hundreds of local elections. Fast forward to just a month ago, and the headline is: a rural Washington school board race shows how far-right extremists are shifting to local power. All right, have you had enough of this? It's our turn, come on. That's the bad news. Now, here's a few slides from a presentation I gave to the Chicago Philanthropy Club in 2017. Now, what these slides show is the narrow victory in our last governor's races. So in 2010, the Democrat won by about 32,000 votes. And then in 2014, the Republican ran and he won by about 142,000. Pretty close. Now, here are some statistics from our sector here in Illinois. We had, and this is old news, over 500,000 nonprofit workers. So statewide margin victory, pretty slim. Nonprofit sector workers, 500,000. You get the picture? But wait, there's more. If you talk about people who work in the education field in Illinois, so this would be teachers and people in training and libraries, it's another 386,000 people. So do the math. 500,000 plus 308,000, you get over 900,000 allies. Staggering, strong allies for justice, peace, equity, and change. Now, my friends, if you look at the national number for nonprofits, our workers, board members, constituents, we're in the tens of millions. And my friends, we are squandering our power. So here's the call to action. I'm calling for 500 people from our world, people who are watching this video right this minute, to run for local office in 2022 and another 1,000 in 2024. And I want you to run as champions of justice, peace, equity, and expanded public service. For our nonprofit service organizations, including the one sponsoring this conference, you all have to make the call and set the table. Lift up these issues and tell this story. You need to seek out civic leadership talent from your ranks and prepare them to run. We need some serious infrastructure around this and some serious funding to sustain it. You all need to encourage, train, and even provide resources for your nonprofits to conduct voter registration drives and to prepare for candidate forums to lift up our issues. The other side has been at this work for over 50 years, and we are so late to this fight. So let's make it a movement. What do you say? Hashtag #RunPlusWinForJustice. Thank you so very much. You can reach me at tom@tresser.com. Stay safe, stay sane, stay strong.